This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast.
Killed Mr. Chumley.
Jeez, Fred, you make it sound so ugly.
You killed Mr. Chumley!
Yes, okay, I killed him. Just hold that door open.
Gaston, Fred, where are you? We've got customers.
She'll be right out there, Irma. Fred, get a grip. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And we're all just different flavors of Alpo. They don't keep the door open long, they'll spoil.
Welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz. Gil will join us shortly. Have I mentioned before what a joy it was making and working on Tales from the Crypt? It was. I can tell you that nothing any of us ever did since was quite like that experience. It really was a show that changed television, and that's because Tales from the Crypt changed HBO. Before Crypt, back in the 1990s, the feature film world and the TV world were two separate things. One could, like a Robin Williams or a Tom Hanks, go from TV into features. But if you were going from movies into TV, that meant your career was dying. The first two original series at HBO, First and 10 and Dream On, were basically regular TV shows, but with tits and the word fuck thrown in. Then Crypt executive producers Joel Silver, Dick Donner, Walter Hill, and Bob Zemeckis approached HBO with an idea to do little horror movies every week as a TV show, all based on a classic comic book from the 1950s. John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper, tells a story, in fact, he told it on this podcast, about the cast and crew screening of the first 3 episodes just before the show premiered. Some crew guys sitting in the second row, having just seen the first episode, were talking amongst themselves, waiting for the second episode. "Wow," says one, "that's great TV." "It's not TV," says the crew guy next to him. "It's HBO." The 2 HBO executives in the row ahead suddenly turn and look back. They just heard HBO's new ad slogan and HBO's new way of seeing itself. When it comes to how Crypt saw itself, one of the key people responsible was John Leonetti, who was director of photography on 11 episodes, including some of the very best. In fact, John Leonetti DP'd season 1, episode 1, the very first Crypt episode ever, Walter Hill's amazing The Man Who Was Death. After Crypt, John made a name for himself as both a DP and a director of horror, including his work on Conjuring as DP and on its follow-up Annabelle as its director. As you'll also hear, John grew up living and breathing the movies, cameras especially. His family's been in the movie business almost from its start. Before opening a hugely successful equipment and camera rental house, John's dad, Frank Leonetti, was a gaffer at MGM. He worked on movies like The Wizard of Oz and Singin' in the Rain. Ironically, among the episodes John DP'd is one called Strung Along, which starred Donald O'Connor, one of the stars of Singin' in the Rain. You see how it always came full circle at Crypt? John Leonetti is not just a Tales from the Crypt alum, he's a guy from a movie legacy family. And he's got lots of stories to tell. Here's John. So this is a reunion of sorts. I know, actually, John, you and I were just talking. We actually spoke briefly about I introduced you to my friend Tom Sullivan about coming aboard to co-direct. I had a mad idea after it was set up at a place called Crusader, and then when that fell apart, I had this mad idea. What if Tom directed The Blind Guy, directed his own movie, and I know the perfect person to who would just fit so nicely with Tom. And actually, when we all talked, I think you and Tom did very well together. Tom's a lovely person. It's very hard to not like Tom. That's but right. You guys seem to have a real special connection. Right. Alas, a great idea, like so many that went nowhere.
Well, you know, you throw so many out there, and some of them, you know, hang, and some of them just disappear. And that's our business, and that's part of, the mystique of it or whatever. I don't know, but
The mystique of shit sliding down a wall.
exactly. Yeah, even more than spaghetti. You're right.
You are not just some odd filmmaker here and there, John. You're like a legacy guy. The Leonettis are a film industry family. Your dad, Frank, was a gaffer on films like The Wizard of Oz and Singin' in the Rain.
Yeah, amazing man, a visionary. God rest his soul. He lived to be 98. I want to say he passed away maybe, 15, 20 years ago. Well, he was a visionary behind the camera, moving the business from stage to location. And that was his big deal in terms of being a great gaffer. I mean, the guy was really smart. He graduated from high school when he was 15.
Where did he grow up? What part of the world did
he grew up in Utah, Provo, Utah. He was born. He was, like basically they were the only Catholic Italians around all these Mormons. So my dad was an incredible athlete.
What business was your family in that they chose to be the sole Catholics in Provo?
Well, my grandfather, he was an interesting character. I'm not sure the business he was running there, if you know what I mean. And so I'm not sure if, I mean, he was involved in something I don't even really know. My dad would never really tell me, but I just know that my dad lived there, grew up there, and like he was an incredible baseball player, played baseball, but they wouldn't let him wear a uniform because he was Italian and not Mormon Catholic and not Mormon. Sure. He didn't give a shit. He just played ball because he was awesome and he enjoyed it. And actually, it's baseball that when they moved to LA, they opened up a bar and restaurant. That's where I met my mom from Oklahoma in LA, near downtown LA, years ago, of course. And he was an electrical engineer by school in trade-ish, but very young. And he randomly played baseball again near Fox Studios. And these guys who were electricians at Fox asked him if he wanted to get in the business, and that's how he got in the business. So baseball has been like was a thread for him. And then, gosh, it was just amazing. He was an incredible gaffer, and that goes on forever. But
now let me just jump in here now for people who don't know what a gaffer does.
Yeah.
What is a gaffer on a film set?
Well, it's a gaff is something that you can use to sort of snag things, I guess, or you can coordinate things. Really, the gaffer is in charge of affecting the lighting that the cinematographer really, desires, if you will. That being said, there's different cinematographers that are stronger or weaker in lighting, and there's gaffers that are also, that can help them, or they're just more tools. Well, my father was more than just a tool. He was definitely, amazing at it. And also, what's interesting about my dad is he was really good using both sides of his brain. He was very, very smart, very analytical, very technical, yet he was also very creative.
Would you say that he understood light the way that a DP or a cinematographer would?
Yeah, oh, big time he did. Oh, yeah. Well, he was the highest paid gaffer in Hollywood in his day. He was the, premier dude in that. And I think I probably learned more about lighting across the dinner table in some ways, but I also learned about it because for other reasons, but he was very good at teaching. Matter of fact, in the 50s, he created this light. It's called the Master Light with a guy named Jack Beckett. And the Master Light was it's a par globe. It literally was a car, head car lamp bulb. That's what they were. They were par bulbs. And so he figured out with his electrical engineering, smarts, whatever, savvy, to that if you took 1,000-watt power globe and instead of running it at 120 watts, you put it on a transformer, knowing that you can boost the voltage up to 250 watts. Okay, now the life of the bulb is less, but the output of that light was equivalent, pumped up to 10, 1,000-watt master light par was as much light at 100 feet as a 10K, a 10,000-watt light.
Wow.
Okay, but the cable was much smaller, and the light was much smaller. Now, it didn't have a Fresnel, it wasn't as evenly spread, but it was awesome. And that's just an example of his ability to kind of figure out how to go from the heavy cable and the big lights at the studio and make stuff portable to go out on location. And then from there, he just built this business. Ultimately, when I was a little boy, by the time I was 6, that was in the mid-50s. I was born in 56. So I was crawling on cable when I was 6 years old. I was living at the shop, and I mean, I got more stories about that. I'm actually writing my memoirs about everything. And there's a lot, that back shop and what I learned in that shop, people called it Leonetti's School of Cinematography.
I'm sure. I mean, because the company that your dad started was a huge, equipment. It was the lighting equipment.
Lighting, grip, camera, sound, generators, everything. Production company. I've got a chair right there. It's Katharine Hepburn's chair from a movie, first union movie I ever worked on. My dad was the gaffer. I was a second assistant getting the slate. Okay. And matter of fact, I pretty much had the slate from every movie I've worked on since I was 15, which was when I worked on my first movie. I was 15. Huh. I was 18 on this one. And our shop had supplied the chairs. So low director's chair, the shorter one, not the high one. Yeah. And it's Katharine Hepburn's chair. And after the movie, I knew that was what an awesome experience I had working with her on that movie. And I said, Dad, can I have the chair? So I've got it right here.
Yeah. Cool. Super cool. It's growing up literally with, this is what you talked about. That's what you talked about over dinner. Well, of course, it is
lived and breathed.
It's the lifeblood. This is, and that this was the family business.
Totally. Literally, I'm a water boy. I love the ocean. I love to surf, and live in San Clemente now. That is why, but neither here nor there. I remember that, from like 6 until I was 13, I would, whenever I got a chance, I would go to the beach. And the year before I was 13, I rode my bike to the beach. We were like 5 miles away, West LA or whatever, or take the bus. And I went to the beach every day of the summer until I was 13. And that was it. Everything changed. During the summer, even after school, and on Saturdays, after I was, anyway, I was at that shop, and I started working at that shop when I was 13, and I haven't stopped working in the business since.
Like we said, your father had a cinematographer or a DP's appreciation of light.
For sure.
And that changes everything, because it's not, as you described, what you can do by amping up the power that you put through one particular kind of bulb. Okay, you'll shorten the life of the bulb, but hey, look at the different kind of light you can create.
Absolutely.
And suddenly, it's like a painter. It's like Monet seeing the Cathedral of Chartres the way that he sees it, in the light now, in the light now, in the light now. And it's always changing. And that you can see the light, that sets you apart from most people.
Well, that is true. It's funny because, look, I grew up in the business. I worked in the business. I got in the union when I was 18, youngest, if you can imagine at that time, probably. I put myself Well, the last 2 years of college, I literally paid for all room and board, all tuition at UCSB. And I still had enough money left over for drugs and to give them to my friends. Okay. So
what kind of drugs
I mean,
were you into?
oh, well then?
Yeah.
Oh, well, what's ironic is I was kind of a goody two shoes through grade school. I literally almost became a priest. I literally almost joined the seminary. Went to the Loyola High School, Jesuit High School. You know, I went to 13 years of Catholic school. Matter of fact, I wanted to be the first American Pope when I was a little kid. Literally, that's crazy shit. But I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
But
it's good to have ambition.
Well, of course. Yeah, no.
Your brother, Matt, also,
Oh, well, we went through the same thing. He's 15 years older than me.
Yeah.
And, he was an excellent cinematographer.
Wow.
He's
Poltergeist?
now. Poltergeist. I was an assistant on that movie,
Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Weird Science, Commando.
I was on all
Edge.
those.
Yeah.
Yep, I worked on all those.
And then all the movies that your brother did with Walter.
Yeah, which is true. Which is how I ended up doing Tales from the Crypt.
Right. There you go, man.
That's what took us
family.
There. Yeah. Because we were doing, I want to say it was another 48 hours, if my memory is right. And Walter asked Matt if he wanted to do it. And I think because it was non-union, I don't know if that was the only reason. I mean, he loved Walter, don't get me wrong, but that was, I think, maybe the reason. And so he said, I think he may have asked Walter before he even brought it up to me. He goes, well, what about John? And Walter just went, whoa, because, mind you, previous to that, I had shot second unit for them. Okay. And Walter knew my abilities. I can tell you Walter Hill's stories. One really cool story about Johnny Handsome that I kind of like opened his mind to his style, and because I was whatever. But bottom line is, I'll never forget this. Walter looked at me. He goes, "Are you man enough, kid?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, sir." And then I met you crazy cats, literally, excuse the expression, use the pun. And that's how it happened. How I got started with y'all.
Well, now you were on Crypt before we were.
Actually, that's true.
Yeah, you preceded us.
That's right.
You were there for the very first season and the second season, and we'll come back to that. But when we went on at the beginning of the third season, and that's when I think you were off shooting The Mask.
That's correct. And I would come back and do an episode maybe, or shoot Bones, the wraparound.
Yeah, and then you were back for season 4. You did None But the Lonely Heart, What's Cooking, The New Arrival, Maniac at Large, Strung Along. So you did some of the seminal episodes of season 4 when you came back to the Tales from the Crypt fold.
That's right. I loved it. That opportunity to shoot The Mask was insane. And I mean, that was giant for my career. And it was the funnest. I considered Tales my roots a bit. It was the coolest training ground, I guess you could call, for me as a very young cinematographer who was fairly creative and actually was even at that point, I think, capable of directing, but that wasn't in my view at the time, and I think I got a sense of storytelling in Tales about how, when you take something like IP, comic books like Tales was, dark comic book, I guess you could say, very much so. And you could create these stories that were these anthologies you could have as much creative freedom in how you made it look, how you lit it, yet I realized, and I think everybody who did it realized, it still had to be real, feel real and realistic, even though, you know, like I experimented with so many colors, like Congo blue, you know, this dark gel and crazy colors on tails. I used it in The Man Who Was Death. I used it in other episodes.
And Walter is such a visual poet.
Oh yeah.
And
Very,
there's
yes.
that episode captures so much of and he's a particular kind of poet. I think no one has a better appreciation for dive bars and titty bars quite like Walter.
True. This is true.
There's an appreciation of what life looks like from the lowest depths, staring up. And you captured that episode has, man, we are literally at the bottom of underneath the bottom of the barrel. That's what you kind of feel like the world looks like in that first episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was fucking gritty. You know, you try and take inspiration from your IP or from the script and the IP. The fact that it was a comic book allowed us to be bold with, like I say, with color and imagery, yet still it had to be so fucking grounded. But especially in horror, the more realistic it is, the more believable it is, and then the scarier it is, period. So I somehow figured that out in Tales that still had this broad palette of creativity. Walter never used a fucking 14mm lens. I don't think ever. The dynamism of moving a wide angle lens close and the feeling of that and the weirdness of that, yet the energy of that, even if it moves slow, because the parallax just fucks with your brain. Boop, boop, boop. Walter even experimented on that. And I can't remember. I want to say that was after Johnny Handsome. It was, because I was an operator on Johnny Handsome. That's right. So, and that's where I introduced Walter to the wide angle lens on that. That's this like story. Maybe if you want me to tell it, I will or not, but
go for it.
Walter's MO, long lenses, baby. His wide lens was a 50, the widest ever. And he'd go up to 1,200mm, but you know, he'd shoot. Every scene was with multiple cameras, action scene, that is. Of course, you know, dialogue was with at least 2, which is great, whatever. But it was all long lenses. And he was into slow motion a bit, and just the, you know, subtle slow motion, and even just like 30 frames sometimes, but 60 was like one of his faves and this and that. But the thing of it is, we had this coin and stamp star robbery in Johnny Handsome, and it was so random how it happened. You know, the whole thing where you pull up outside, you know, I'm handheld in the back of the car, you know, and this Mustang ripping down, having a blast as a camera operator, whatever. And there's multiple cameras, you know, as these guys arrive and they decide to blast in and rob this fucking thing. And we were going to shoot. It's where they come in first, come through the door, and they smash all the, you know, the jewelry counters, if you will.
Yeah.
And he had like 5 cameras he wanted to set up, this and that. Well, randomly, I had a wide angle lens, like a 14, randomly on the camera. And I don't know why. Maybe I was checking the flange on it, because checking the flange was assistant. I was an assistant before that. And maybe we were checking the flange. I can't remember, but you check it with a wide lens because that's more critical than a long lens. But that's what minor technical bullshit. But anyway, it was just sitting in the front. And the assistant at the time, Mike Weldon, you know, was kind of looking at it, and there's like the door was 2 double doors with bars on it. And he said, "John, this looks pretty cool." And I go, "Fuck, that does look cool." And it just hit me. So I thought, shit, because I loved handheld operating. I was actually okay at it. And why the hell do we want to do this with just 5 cameras. Why don't you let me just take this camera with this 14 and let these guys come in and let them get in my face and push me. And when they go down, I'll whip down, break up. I'll put, I had gloves on and shit, so the glass flies. Anyway, can I just do it all in one? Can we just try doing it all in one in this section, please? He looks at me. He goes, He goes, okay. And if I don't like it, I'll reshoot it. And I said, dude, no, I'm not going to be responsible for that shit. I said, it's like, but I wanted to do it. And he let me do it. If you look at the movie, it's dynamic as hell and it's great. And so, but that's when he, learned about a 14 millimeter lens. Not that he didn't know about it before, I'm sure, but I think it helped change his style actually.
He had never thought to, since he was never, the idea, it's not that the idea came from someone else. It's just that because it's just not how he was thinking. It was not how he was visualizing. And then he suddenly saw it and he went, my God, that's genius.
Well, I don't know if it's genius or not, but the thing of it is, as a director, because I'm a director.
But it adds something. It adds something that wasn't there before.
Oh, totally.
It makes it better. Okay.
Well, but as a director, you have to be, in my opinion, the best idea wins. You're just the one that decides what that is, in my opinion. That's another one of my sort of approaches as a director. I don't care if it's craft service, it has a good idea, great, but anyway.
That sounds suspiciously Zemeckis.
Oh, Zemeckis is, I never worked with him, but that would be Zemeckis. What a gem he is. So is Walter, by the way. No, oh my God. You couldn't work for a nicer, cooler, amazing man.
Among the other directors you worked with was the guy sitting here. You were the director of photography on What's Cooking.
Oh, yes.
How could you work with a schmuck like that? Huh?
Oh, it was so fun. We had so much fun. Oh my God. Oh my God.
And that kind of goes to the thrust of what you were talking about, making it look, there's a certain reality that you want to capture. And that was a show about cannibalism.
Yes, it was.
And there were a couple of shots that were really to sell it. There was the butt steak shot. That I think was one of the most audacious things we ever did on
Tales awesome.
From the Crypt.
Talk about meatloaf. Oh my God. That was so fun. I mean, and Gil did a great job. I helped him out a little bit, but my goodness.
Really helped me out a lot of bit. I mean, I told John this story. I think we were talking a few weeks back, and to see if he even remembered it. But I remembered it very vividly, that I was having a little trouble figuring out, like, what's the first shot? How do I get into the show? I know when Alan and I were writing, we were talking about music, and I was thinking, I love the idea of early Louis Armstrong. I love Louis Armstrong, but early Louis Armstrong would be the way to go with the music. And I had that in my head, but I didn't know how to start the show. And I'm like, how do we get into the show? I mean, and I'm looking at the stove and I'm looking at the oven, and John just looked at me and said, well, come over here. Take a look from over here. If we put the light on the stove and you hear swish and it goes blue, and then the other, and then we pan over here and then dolly around here. What do you think of that? And I was like, shit, why didn't I think of that? That was perfect. That was just perfect. And that's the kind of collaboration, you really want with a DP, where there's such trust between the two of you that he can say whatever he feels like, and I can say whatever I feel like. But he saved my bacon many times in that episode.
Appropriately so for that episode.
Well, I wouldn't say I saved your bacon. I think that what was
I would.
Well, that's fair enough. But you know what?
In fact, you still have that saved bacon somewhere, don't you, Gil?
Absolutely.
You saved the saved bacon.
That's it.
You also got to work with Frankenheimer on Maniac at Large.
Oh my God. Oh my God. And you know what? That was giant for me, that opportunity. It was random because, God rest his soul. I love that man. He's a tough son of a bitch. Okay. And that's after he quit drinking. I didn't know him when he was drinking. Oh my God.
He had a demon or two.
Yeah. Well, yes. And he was so loyal I mean, I'll never forget this. At the end of the episode, he came up to me and it was 4 a.m. last night. And I'm putting my meters back in my bag. I'm kneeling on the ground and he looms over me and he, you know, the way he would like use his finger and go, you know, and he goes, John, this is not 4 a.m. talk. You're going to do my next show. You're doing my next show. And I looked up and I go, yes, sir. You know, I'll never forget it. And I did everything he did after that for a while. And he, you know, then we went on and did 2 movies, you know, for HBO, the Against the Wall, The Burning Season. One he got an Emmy for, the other one we got the Golden Globe for the best thing on television that year. And that also, with Tales, helped set up HBO as a company in terms of their movie structure. I mean, sure. It's amazing what came out of all of our collaborations. But I got to back up for a second though, because, you know, I'll never forget this, because Gil and Frankenheimer, oh my God. They were in the office and they called me in, and I'm this, you know, how old was I? Shit, 21, 2, I don't know. I was pretty young. And I sit down and I introduced to John, and the whole episode we built on stage. It was a library set.
Right.
And it was 2-story. Yep. Part of it was 2-story, where her office was upstairs and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, John used a Steadicam all the time before that and after that. He loved it. And rightfully so. Boy, did he know how to use that fucking thing. But anyway, our show couldn't afford a Steadicam. So we talked about, and he said, look, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to move this camera all over this fucking thing. And I'll have this other shot with a crane. I want to move along the floor and come up the stairs. Ultimately, what we did is we made the whole floor a dance floor, you know, out of plywood. We painted it so it was smooth and we could dolly. I'll never forget him asking me in front of Gil, can you do this? Can you pull this off? And I looked at him and I said, thought for a minute. Yes, sir. And walked out, and I remember either Frankenheimer or Gil told me this. I can't remember, because I did multiple things with John after that. He said I think Gil told me this. He said either this kid is full of shit or he knows what the hell he's doing. And obviously at the end of the episode, at least he thought I knew something. So I'll never forget that. I mean, oh my God, I learned so much from him as a director. I've gotten into this whole horror and thriller thing, which I love doing. But my 2 mentors are Frankenheimer and Hitchcock when I do anything like this. And that's who I tap, if you will. I'll never forget.
Good choices. Excellent choices.
Well, not bad. They were pretty talented guys, and you know, just to have an essence of their abilities through, you know, with is just so cool. You know,
you also got to work with Elliot Silverstein.
I did. That's right. That's right.
On Well Cooked Hams, which was an undertaking with Billy Zane and Martin. What's his name?
You know, I remember doing the episode, of course. I remember Billy was an intense guy, right? Very intense guy. And, you know, I think we did okay. I don't know if I don't honestly remember that much of doing that episode as much as like the one with Frankenheimer with Gil for some reason. But Elliot was a cool guy, but he's kind of an intense guy from what I remember, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Elliot was one of those directors who he saw the whole thing in his head. Yeah. It was all cut already. And so he knew what he needed and he knew what he didn't. And he wanted what he wanted, and the stuff he just didn't want to waste his time and our time or the money. So he was on the one hand, he could be economical, but on the other hand, because he knew specifically what he wanted, oh my God, he could make you crazy just trying to get what the fuck he
To
wanted.
achieve it. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And
And he did. He made
now
me
that you
crazy.
say it,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember now, but it's for some reason that just doesn't stick in my mind. But I totally. I mean, it was a great
Because
director.
he was basically a real sweetheart.
Yeah.
He had
Yeah.
this visual, he had this visual intention
That's
of what he wanted to do, knew exactly what it was. Didn't want to be argumentative, didn't want to get into fights,
Right.
but he would to protect his, what he saw. But then when you said to him, John, that's the feature version. We're doing a 5-day television version. So we're not going to see from here to India. We're only going to see from here a half a block to the left.
Right. That's right. That's right. Which is good. I mean, he was obviously an extremely experienced television director, and he did movies as well, I think, but
He did Capaloo and he did A Man Called Horse.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's right. I mean, that's right. But he had that, well, maybe it's even old school feature making. I mean, let's face it, Hitchcock had the whole movie done in his head before he ever started, ever.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Oh, yeah. That was for a lot of them, that was the style. They really did see it.
Well, on that note, honestly, thinking now about Elliot, and now that you guys bring all that back, and John, I mean, when I direct now, I do what's called my output, and I wait until about 2 weeks of prep. These are movies. 2 weeks of prep are left. I even do it when I've directed television, actually. I find the time. But basically, it's like a storyboard without pictures. It's the whole movie cut. I mean, I write out every cut, scene, because I'm very visual. And I do that for every damn movie. And I hand it to the first AD. I hand it to the producers. I hand it to everybody before we start shooting. Now, that doesn't mean, that's only what you're going to do. But I will say, like on Annabelle, the movie I directed, which did okay, I'd say 75% of that movie is exactly my output, and 25% are just cool things that happen when you're shooting. When you're that prepared, actually,
It frees
you
you.
have more creative freedom,
Yeah,
right?
it really does.
Well,
It's cool.
you know what you need to get to in order to tell the story, and then hey, if you've got time for icing on the cake, take the icing. Sure, of course.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's true. But in that, okay, relating to Hitchcock's or Elliot's way of making movies and shows, I love that, actually, because I hate waste. I'm actually super efficient, and even was as a cinematographer. But it's really interesting but on the other side of the coin, another thing about it I've learned, especially as a director, is cover your ass. CYA in terms of cuts. Get as many cuts that do. Just run another camera, and if it's one moment, get it, and then you don't want to go back later. You want to have, but that's just another aspect of it.
There's just the basic responsibilities of telling the story.
Right.
You could do worse than shooting master coverage. It might not be terribly interesting, but you'll tell the story.
Well, that's true.
Hey, a little flair here and there is nice in the transitions. Yeah. At the end of the day, Napster came for us all. I think in terms of all of our jobs, really everything is peer to peer. So when I say anyone can direct, what I mean is everyone is directing now.
Right.
And the technology got to the place where there are people who produce stuff that appears entirely on YouTube, their YouTube channels, and they're making lots and lots of money.
Sure.
And they never have to listen to what a studio boss ever says. The story making world has changed.
And that's good. I support that, by the way.
Ooh, hey, there's nothing we can do. We can fight it all we like. where there was the story of Caligula fighting the tides.
Right.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck
Right.
with that. Yeah. Yeah, that'll work. After Tales from the Crypt,
Yeah,
you hooked up with James Wan,
I did.
and you guys had a couple of productive years together.
We did. We did. You know, that was so fun. That collaboration. James is a nice man, nice guy, really. You know, very smart. And I was a universal boy, I called myself. I'd shot like Scorpion King and I don't know, a few other movies there. And I guess the studio kind of liked me and thought I was, you know, experienced enough, yet sort of still young enough and creative enough that maybe James might like me and that in a collaboration with me. And the first movie we did was Dead Silence. And, you know, I had a blast. He's the master of horror in many ways of our time right now, or what?
Can I ask you? Can I stop here for 1 second?
Sure.
All right, horror.
Yeah.
Was growing up? What was horror your thing?
No.
Or did horror become your thing because hey, you're good at making it?
You know, it started obviously with Tales. You know what I've learned about horror, and it's again started with Tales, and definitely with every single horror movie I've been involved in any capacity, but especially as a cinematographer and as a director, even more. In horror, everybody has their tool bag. You get to use a lot more tools in your tool bag in horror than you do in other genres, in my opinion. It's not looked upon that way as classy maybe as the other genres, drama, even comedy, whatever. But you actually get to I don't want to say experiment more, but your job is a little different because in horror you want to get under the audience's skin, and if you can, and if you could, you do that, and you get into you enlist them into the characters, and then you can really fuck with them basically, and use the tools that you learn in horror to learn how to make people sit on the edge of their seat, or make the hair on the back of their neck or their arms go up, or jump, or whatever. It takes crafting, real crafting, okay? And horror and thrillers are very interlocked, or very similar, actually. So going back again to Tales, I think, I don't know. I got the opportunity and I had no clue that I was any good at that horror at all. I didn't know. I just thought it was a really cool opportunity. And I guess my sense of being able to literally go from using like a wide angle lens and these wild colors to, literally, available light and a handheld camera that could be so powerful, or something that can be so literally stylized and but the point is there's so many tools in the tool bag that you have to use, from lighting, camera, of course, you got to get them in the audience invested in telling a story, in the script and the characters, and then sound. Oh my God, sound. It's sound is giant in horror, and honestly, if you're using too much score in horror, you've got a pretty not a great piece, in my opinion. If you need the sound, score to make the movie scarier, actually. Now, if you use it properly, it's awesome. But the point is, there's so many facets of all of what we do as filmmakers, and to tell a story. And I think horror uses maybe more than any of them, because it even incorporates action as well. But I
Or
could go on.
imagine doing a movie where sound is the thing that the monster will hear.
That's correct.
And so sound suddenly be suddenly you can amplify little sound, and every little sound becomes an object of terror.
That's right. Oh yeah, no, it's so true. There's actually a project that I'm involved in presently that 85% of the movie, or 90, takes place in a car with a woman inside a car, and she's trapped, and a guy with a radio is just fucking with her the whole time, the whole movie. Okay. And so then you start thinking about that. How do you approach that? How do you tell that story with a woman in a car for the whole movie? Okay. And then, initially what I thought, for example, is, okay, so once she's in this car, in the opening of the movie, it's normal, and this really gnarly shit cop pulls her over, and then forces her to get out of the car, makes her pass out, bangs her head on the hood a couple of times. She wakes up in this car, and until the very, very end, almost, she's in this thing. And so one option is, once you're in there, you never leave the car. You never, ever take the camera outside the car. And so you never cut outside for a transition shot. You don't even, that's a bold way to do it. Now, mind you, I would shoot those shots because you may want to have those, but in respect to sounds, and to your point, the sound inside that car is very different than the sound outside the car. And in the story, it's raining a lot, and so even the sound on the roof, and even when, if me, I would stop it sometimes and have it start again. So, you hear the pitter patter and whatever. So sound. It's so fucking important. It's so cool. And again, I think it's horror. This is a thriller. This one's not horror. It's not supernatural at all. But I believe that in horror, you get to use all those tools, and it's so fun. I'd love to just do a drama. I'm a sap too, and if I get that opportunity, I will, of course. But it's just so fun to do. And working with James, who is a master at crafting scares, back to him, which you brought up, was just a giant thing for me, and I helped him too. I think, and
it has to look a certain way, or it's not going to succeed. And I think what you have an amazing eye. You've always had just a tremendous eye and a great sense of camera and moving the camera, and just you understand light, of course.
Oh yeah, that I do. That part.
So Annabelle's a great looking movie.
It's not bad, actually. It's actually a really good movie. And we, I think we shot that movie in 22 days. And then we did some additional photography, ended up at 26. I think we made the movie for ultimately, I think, 6 million. But
the Conjuring, which you were just the DP.
Yeah.
That's a great looking movie.
That's a phenomenal movie.
Great looking movie. That's the highest grossing horror franchise. That's the start of the highest grossing horror franchise. It's made over $2 billion.
Yeah, I know.
That franchise.
Yeah. And by the way,
nothing to sneeze at.
I think that is maybe my best, if not definitely some of my best work as a cinematographer on The Conjuring. And that's a whole other discussion on why I feel that way. But that was, it takes you back to Tales in a way, and being on how much we did on stage, we didn't go on location a lot from what I remember, and, learning to do that and tell stories that way. And, the fact that whole interior of that movie, which is a lot of that movie in that house. So much. We built it on stage. and matched it. I built a 280-degree cyc at the real location that we found on the Black River of this farmhouse. And then, we blended the two, and James's idea. It was brilliant how we first go into the house and how we combine the exterior and the interior with it's just two simple green screens with a Steadicam shot. We built that set, and it's so cool. The room's just a hair bigger than what they normally would be. We never pulled a wall. I never pulled a ceiling piece. I had ceiling pieces, but we didn't even have walls to pull. We didn't build it that way. We built it so we were forced to shoot within it, okay? And then I had the lighting set up, and this is one thing that's good for everybody and anybody who does any movie, but much less horror, especially for the actors, for the director, for everybody. The baby of Conjuring, or the Conjuring, the inspiration for Conjuring and how it was executed was done on Insidious 1, which we shot in continuity. Now, that's a great idea, but what does that entail? And actually, at first, you're going to go, oh, shit. You have to light the whole house. You don't light a room. You don't shoot out a room. You don't shoot out a situation. You don't do that. So many movies are made that way, okay? So what you have to learn to do, aside from having the lighting so fucking natural and real and all that, using practicals and blah, 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 that, what a cool challenge that is. But to have it be able to move the camera anywhere in that house at any time, and being able to switch from night to day in 5 minutes. On The Conjuring, we had it set up on the dimmer panel. Literally, we could change the day from day to night in 5 minutes. The whole house, the whole stage.
Wow.
Okay? So
it's like you should have shot several movies that way.
Well,
right there on that set,
oh my God, yeah.
Reel them off.
It makes sense. It actually is more efficient. Again, it's all about prep. Preparation is the key to success. And God bless, people want to cut prep short, and it's the stupidest thing you can do in my opinion. It'll save you so much later. So the reason I'm saying that is, for example, this is really cool. On Insidious 1, we did that movie for nothing. I did it for nothing for James. It was $1 million budget. Okay. Now, that being said, I worked out a deal with Jason Blum, and ultimately everybody got a piece of the movie, and we got paid at the end. You never hear that shit, right? Ever. Okay.
You actually saw a cut?
I got 70 grand for the movie, or maybe, yeah. And I made sure my key grip got more. He threw his equipment in, and he got,
cool.
He did it for nothing. Danny Riley at the time. And I think he got 80. I want to make sure he got more than me. But the point is, through, his equipment, but what we did was we shot that movie in one camera in 20 days. And we shot it in continuity, but we prepped it for 6 weeks. Okay.
That made it possible.
And that's what made it possible. And it made it so amazing. And it's a win-win-win-win. These are just things I've learned, you guys, over the years, from working with all these wonderful people. I've been so blessed, including you guys, to work with.
Well, the feelings were always incredibly mutual, John.
Well, that's sweet. Thank you.
And
cool.
I feel like this is we've but scratched the surface of, and as you said, there were so many stories to talk about so many of the artists that you've worked with and for. So we're going to have you back, John.
Okay, well, sure. I know I probably talked too much. But,
No, that was the point of the exercise.
On these
Hey,
things, right?
Hey, the last thing anybody wants to hear is either of these two schnorrers talk, so it might as well be you.
Well, I got a lot to say.
Yes, you do.
Literally, now 50 years Israel. Literally, I've been in this business over.
Really and truly, you have been on many film sets. But like I said, I thank you so much for sitting in with us for this episode. Like I said, we must have you back. We scratched the surface. There's so many other things to talk about, which we will. Thank you, everyone, as always, and we will see you next time. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrorism